can date this, before 1998, you got a letter. So a big envelope meant good news. A big, thick envelope meant good news. And that's how people found out if they were admitted. They wait in the mailbox. So decision, let's say it's today, and then they'll have to wait 2-3 days before the letter arrives to them, right? So big envelope meant good news, and a small envelope, means not very good news. And that's how we delivered the decisions.
The following is a long open conversation with Rod Garcia, the legendary admission director of MIT Sloan. We got a chance to talk about many topics, like what has been his journey from Manila to Massachusetts, how was the world of admissions back in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and the 2010s, and which are his current endeavors across Southeast Asia. This is On the Lawn with FVR podcast. If you like this thing, feel free to like and subscribe and to contribute to the channel on the description below. And now with y'all, Rod Garcia. Now that it is running, I can see here. From time to time, I'm gonna be checking the other phone just to make sure that there are no things.
I see. Yeah.
So can you imagine that there has been a lot of rain recently? From time to time it's sunny, but the other times it's just water and water.
Yes.
I guess we can start anytime.
We can say, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode on The Long with FVR. Today we have Rod. Thanks for doing this, man.
Thank you very much.
So it's very fantastic that you have the opportunity to experience many places of the world.
Right.
And I guess during my time here, I only saw you twice, for extended times.
Right.
One was last summer, and now.
Yes.
So people may be watching you, and they will be like, "Oh, I recognize that face." But for the ones who are unfamiliar, would you like to tell us a little more about yourself?
Thank you. Thank you very much. We actually met 3 times. I first met you in August when I came here a year ago. And then I came back in October. Remember, I gave a talk on the MS program.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And then, of course, this is, the 3rd time that we're meeting by accident down at Ben's. And of course, on Saturday, we were at this party, and this led to this. So what was the question again? Oh.
Can you tell us a little more about yourself?
Oh, yes. So just a bit of a background. My association with ASB started all the way back in 2015. I was still at MIT. I was back then the senior director of admissions for MIT. Charlie Fine, when he was appointed the dean, CEO, and president of ASB, called me, and I was home. And in fact, he did come to my office. I was not in the office. I already left for home, and he wanted to talk to me and mention this school, ASB. So he needed my help on admissions, setting up an admissions office. We did have a meeting, and who on the board wrote down his vision of ASB, and we talked about admissions. And incidentally, my number 2, who was the associate director of admissions, had just retired from her position in Chile. She was the head of the Latin America office, the MIT Sloan Latin America office. And I recommended her for this job. So her name is Julie Strong, and she was the person who brought in the first class that graduated in 2018. I knew a lot of people in 2018. That's a very long story. I'll get to my intro. And of course, the second year, Emily Price was identified, and she had become the director of admissions until she left about a year ago. So that's my association with ASB. And as I said, I work for MIT. I've been there. I started working at MIT since 1988 and retired in May 2021. So that was 2 years ago. A year ago in August 22, Jake Cohen, who has been the interim dean of ASB, talked to me, and it's an opportunity for us to work together again. And I like Jake. And he mentioned this opportunity, and I said, why not? I've been here, but not in this building, but I've been to the old campus, so I'm familiar. And I said, yeah, I'm gonna help. So it was initially a 1 month assignment, and then I came in October when I saw you, and then I came back in February this year, and then now here in August. So and I'll be back again next year. So I've been helping in admissions. But initially, when Jake asked me to help him, it was to help him redesign the new curriculum, which we will be launching on Monday with a new class. So it's good to see the full picture, the whole circle of coming here in August, working with Jake on the new curriculum, right pricing the program, and then welcoming the class, on Monday. So that was my involvement. And then I've been involved a lot with admissions, so I also interviewed this year's class, MBA, many of them, and also with the MBA. So that's what I've been doing. So if you see me around here, I'm mainly in the admissions office, and also been helping a lot of the folks here because I spent 33 years in academia and in higher ed, so I've been helping them on, because most of the people who work here come from Bank Negara, so their background is bank, and it's now running school, so I've been helping them a lot on seeing things that happen, in university. Very long answer.
But it's a good answer, especially because it gives the details of how relationships can lead towards new opportunities.
Yeah,
And
indeed.
1988,
Yeah.
it was
yeah.
a different world.
Yeah.
So what made you say, okay, this is an opportunity to make a career?
Yeah. That's a very interesting question, because in our lives we have mentors. We have people who have helped us, who trusted us and adopted us almost like their children, right? And then mentored us. And so my initial introduction to higher education or admissions was at University of Chicago. I started working there much earlier. I started in admissions in 1984 at University of Chicago, although I was at University of Chicago even before that. And my boss there, who gave me the opportunity to work in admissions, I was looking at Facebook today, unfortunately passed away today. So it's unfortunate, and I owe her a debt of gratitude because she was the one who gave me a break, in admissions. And 33 years, I retired as assistant dean of MIT, and that wouldn't have happened, had it not been for this lady. And unfortunately, the last time I saw her was in 1989 when she came to Boston, and I lost touch with her until one day a mutual friend was on Facebook, and her name appeared, and I friended her, and this was probably about 3 years ago, and that's how we got connected. So anyway, relationships are very important. I think now people, the relationships now are often limited to online, right? Mm-hmm. There's a benefit to that, right? I would say, like, I got reconnected to my former boss. Her name is Liana Cunningham. She retired in Detroit, and we got connected through Facebook, which is wonderful, right? Although we haven't seen each other, but relationships are very important. I think in our lives, there are people who mentored us, people who look after our interests, and just out of their goodness, and in a way, I sort of do that, in admissions, right? You help people, and that's why I stayed in admissions for 33 years, because you change people's lives. I mean, just like people have changed my lives, and my life, and and I'm paying it back by changing people's lives. So unfortunately, I was not involved in in your admission, but but now involved with this new batch of ASP students.
It's true.
Yeah.
And it's important to realize that back then in the 80s there was no internet. And barely there was some cell phones, but it was very, very few far between. Only the fax, and if you were lucky, and also the conventional.
Yes, the desktop phone, exactly.
So I need to ask, back then, how people got admitted?
Ah, very interesting question. And remind me to tell you the other part of that story. It was all on paper, people.
So they send pounds of paper?
Oh yeah,
Or
yeah,
how was it?
absolutely. So
Wow.
people, so this is how it was, right? So back then, if you were interested in a school, if you were sitting, let's say here in Malaysia, right, or in Singapore or in India, and you were interested in a school, you often went to the U.S. Embassy library, and you looked at. In fact, this is what someone told me from India, when when he applied to school, he went to the U.S. Embassy library, researched all the schools. There used to be a book, and then and there were no rankings. And you applied depending on the weather, right? I mean, said, oh, weather in California is great, I'm going to apply there. And sometimes people think, oh, Chicago's great, they saw it in the movie, not knowing that in December it gets cold. So that was how it was. It was all, on book, just like, back during our day, someone actually had asked, how do you travel from one place to the other before Google Maps? I said, you had a road map and a piece of paper. It told you turn left, turn right, and you had, a dime, for the call. That was really it. So back then, people found out about schools through a book, and they often went to a library for that. And then they would write to the school and say, I'm interested, can you send me a brochure? And so that would take another, 2 weeks, right? Or, in a month, they'll probably get their brochure. And in the brochure is an application. And if they were interested, they would submit an application, on paper. They would type their essays, they would type a form, and they will mail it. And then it would take us about 2 months to read. And then we would give them a decision. It was all in a letter. And, before, and I can date this, before 1998, you got a letter. So a big envelope meant good news. A big, thick envelope meant good news. And that's how people found out if they were admitted. They would wait in the mailbox. So decision, let's say it's today, and then they'll have to wait 2-3 days before the letter arrives to them, right? So big envelope meant good news, and a small envelope, means not very good news. And that's how we delivered the decisions. Very different because it gave us, in admissions, gave us time to mail that decision and for us to take a breather. It doesn't happen that way anymore. Nowadays, you send a decision. If they're not accepted, you get an email right away, and they want to know right away why they were not accepted. So that's a difference, this year. But also in the past, with that leeway, we had time to inform the recommenders, right? The alumni recommenders, especially, that there are people that they're recommending got admitted or did not, get it. But now you have to do it before you send the decision. So it's, just really a lot of pressure, incentive. So there are advantages, but there are also, disadvantages. But the advantage of, the internet is you're reaching a lot of people, far more people than you reached before. You're reaching to very remote places. Yeah.
It's true. Talking about remote places, And talking about times where there was not so much connectivity, during those years before 1998,
Yeah.
which was the most remote location that you got some interaction?
Well, gosh, a very different world back then. And I told you I was going to tell you about the
The other side of the story.
the other side of the story. So let me tell that other side of the story. Saturday when we had dinner, I was having this conversation with another person who from Malaysia, graduated from Wisconsin in 1983, and we were talking, and I said, my father passed away in 2000, and I remember until 1988, we wrote letters.
Oh,
Yeah, and I tell you why we stopped writing letters, because around 88, 89, it got less expensive. It was cheaper to call than to write.
ah,
You know, you could just pick up the call. And by the way, back then, before the cell phones, right, you had to wait until 8 o'clock in the evening before you can call the West Coast, right, in California, right? Because rates go down, you know, when business hours end. So you waited until, 8 o'clock, and then you can call. MCI was one of the first companies that came to market back. They broke Bell and AT&T, so that's why all this competition. But we wrote letters. That's how we did, and I'm glad we did, because after my father passed away, I kept the letters. I scanned them. I read. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen anymore. It's all phones, emails, and you lose your emails. So, and I feel bad for people who've lost their parents recently, because they have no record of correspondence. So anyway, that was it. So, but what was your question?
talking about that particular
Uh
time
huh.
and
Yeah.
given the interactions,
Yeah. Yeah.
which was the most remote location
Oh
that was
yes. Thank you
interactive?
very much. Thank you. I think the farthest. It was fascinating. It was a different world. In America, the majority of applicants back in the 80s were from Japan. It was
Ah,
lots of Japanese, right? You'd probably see, you'd probably hear a student from China, and that student from China is probably already in the United States, not someone from China. So someone who's really gotten out of China, right? But India was still rare. You'd probably, not a lot of people, apply. Africa was just nowhere, nowhere in the map. And South America was just nowhere in the map. You'd probably get a lot of people from, not a lot, but most of the people probably come from Mexico and the Andean, right? Colombia, Venezuela, especially Venezuela, right? And then you'll probably have one or two from Argentina, maybe one or two from Chile, and that changed in the 90s. More and more people applied from those places. Not a lot from Australia.
oh,
It was too far. It was too far. Yeah.
wow.
We did have one from New Zealand. I don't know how we got that one from New Zealand in the first class at MIT that I was involved in, but it was not as diverse as it is now. Yeah.
So we can say that with the advantage of technology, diversity grew exponentially.
Oh yes, yes, absolutely. But also keep in mind, with with, let's say, the internet, with cable TV, the level of English of international students is also got up, right? I mean, you see that in South America. You meet people there, they can speak English fluently. Same thing in Japan, or same thing in China. So all of that certainly has helped, because they watch YouTube, they watch CNN. I don't watch CNN, but all the forms of media is available to everyone.
Now, given those particular dynamics between the 80s and the 90s, what was different in the early 2000s?
Well, 2000 is really when the internet exploded. By the way, I will tell you, the first, I was lucky being at MIT. MIT, you're in the middle of, you have a ringside view of what's happening in technology. And we're all witnessing that now with, I mean, ChatGPT in November 22 was the first time I heard of ChatGPT. Right? I wish I was still in MIT, but 1993 was the first time I saw the World Wide Web, the internet, Mosaic. Someone asked me, "Oh, why don't you come down to the basement, which is where the computer lab is?" And he logged in, and there was Mosaic. That was like fascinating, to see, the internet at that time. And of course, people didn't know the applications of the internet. But in 2000, I'll tell you, in 2000 is when I guess that was what they called Web 1.0, and this reminded me of what I was going to say also about after 98 was when we started sending decisions online.
Ah.
Right. So after 98, we stopped mailing them. We still mailed, it's a hard copy, but the decision was sent, at a certain time at the deadline, so they knew it. So around 2000 is when, that Web 1.0 and 2.0, right? And so now everything now is, on the web. We don't publish anything. They get the information on the web. They don't call us to request a brochure. It's right there. Nobody goes to the library in U.S. embassies anymore because they have that information. And lots of resources, including your podcast. So.
Oh, yeah. It's a humble resource. I believe that nowadays it will be very weird to hear in an office that the phone is ringing.
Oh gosh, yes, absolutely. I don't have a desktop phone. I don't. At home, I don't. I cut off my phone. Yeah. Even the phone here, I don't think you can call outside. So yeah.
It's true. It's true. Sometimes it's like you already have even one or two phones on your pocket. So
Right.
if you have certain night for a certain brand.
Yeah.
But it's also the wave of technology how it's supposed to make things easier,
Yes. Yes.
and the decisions usually happens to be a big element in
Yeah.
everybody's career. Talking about decisions, I need to ask you, across these years or decades, if you want to say it, which was the most challenging decision that you did?
You mean what do you mean in admission decision, personal decision?
It can be also personal.
Wow. I think it was in '88 when I was making this decision to move to Boston. I had a good job. And this person who mentored me, who passed away. Today I had to tell her the news that actually is very interesting. And this is a lesson for everyone, by the way. So back in '88, I was assessing my own career. Where am I going to go? I looked at looked at my strengths and weaknesses, and I said that my strength was in admissions. So I'm going to look for a position in admissions, and so I had started sending applications to several schools. And one of the schools I applied to was MIT. I wrote, that's the other thing, when you apply, you wrote a letter, a cover letter. You sent your resume, you put it in an envelope, and they receive it. They're different now, right? Very different world now, right? LinkedIn, they contact. So it was all. So I sent a cover letter and my resume without telling my boss.
Okay.
Did not tell my boss about it. And a week later, my boss, which is the boss of this boss who just passed away, he came to my office and he said, "Oh, I was just at a conference he named this person at MIT, and he said, and he told me you applied and said, you're going to get a call." So you'll be interviewed. So I said, like, embarrassing. So first lesson is that if you're going to apply, have the courtesy of telling your boss, right? Exactly. And I did not. It was very embarrassing, but he was very supportive. In fact, he was the one who told me that this, my boss at MIT was going to call me. And after that, he called. I got a call to say, why don't you come to Boston? Would like to meet you. Would like to interview you. So I went there. First time in Boston, didn't know anyone. I've never been to Boston. I interviewed, and I liked the people I met. I had interviewed for other positions, but I felt for the first time, I felt that the other jobs that I interviewed, I didn't care if I didn't get the job right. But for the first time when I was at MIT, when I interviewed there, I felt if I did not get this job, I would be disappointed because it's not that I wanted the job, but it's because I wanted to work with these people. I like the people. I really enjoy talking to them. I want to be part of them. And 2 weeks later, my boss came to my office and he said, if they make you an offer, ask for money, a lot of money. So they did offer me. I asked for money, they didn't give it to me. So
Oh, come on.
exactly. So, but it was the best decision. So going back to your question, in our lives we stand, in front of a fork, on the road, and you often wondered, should I take left or should I take right? And I took left, and and I have no regrets, that I took that left. I wonder if I took the right side, where would I be right now? I'm sure I would be, in a good place, but I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be talking to you. My life would be, really different. But I took that chance, big risk. I didn't know anyone. Right? It could have been, it could have been, it could have been, it could have been an unhappy, relationship at MIT, but it didn't turn out, that way. And as a consequence, I stayed for 33 years. Yeah.
Given that scenario, and also that you mentioned that you had to make a move
Yeah.
to Boston from Chicago.
Yeah.
How was the story before?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah.
how did you arrive to Chicago? Because I mean, Windy City, okay,
Yeah.
I have different opinions.
Yeah.
but-
Well, the family was there, right? And that's where they immigrated from the Philippines. So, I don't know why they didn't go to a warm place like California, right?
Yeah, that's what I
right.
want to ask. Like,
Exactly.
why did you choose
I
Windy
don't
City?
know. Maybe they, again, I guess they immigrated there before the internet. And so I said, they probably saw a movie about Chicago and it looked nice in the summer. And they said, I can deal with that and I can deal with winter. But I'm glad. I'm glad because I love cold weather now. I mean, I don't mind. But it's very interesting, why not Dallas, right? I don't think I could survive in Dallas. Just too hot for me.
It's fine.
Right, and humid in Houston, of course. I have relatives who live in California. I had considered moving to California. I'm glad I did not move to California. I'm glad I stayed in Boston, and I'm not going to leave Boston. I think I'm going to be there. So yeah, it's amazing how fate, brought us to where we are, and you here, right? I mean, and who knows where you're going to be the next 9 months, which is actually, so I think the other thing I wanted to say is, one of the things I live by, one of the sayings I live by is seize the day. People know that. But there's a second part to that, seize the day, don't put trust in tomorrow, right? Because you don't know what tomorrow can bring. So whatever opportunity you have, seize it, because you don't know what tomorrow will be. Yeah.
That's a very powerful message, because sometimes we are just
Yeah.
relying on, let's say you buy a stock, the
Yeah.
dividends, or if you buy
Yeah.
something, that is gonna last longer.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I have another story about that, and I was just thinking about this because I attended a reunion at MIT, class of '98. So they spent their 25th reunion. So '98, I should recall again, internet was just bubbling. So seize the day, right? That's one part. The other part is don't be greedy, right? So I remember back then, one of someone in the class, had joined had left a very good consulting position to do a startup, in the internet space. And they were quite successful. And there was another competition in Boston, the company. And the company was interested in acquiring them, but they did not sell because they wanted more money because they think that the value of this company is more than what this buyer wants to pay us. This was around 99, 2000. And then, I don't know, for people who were born before way before that, will remember the internet bus in 2000, of course, and then 9/11, September 11, right? And they were, they turned down an offer because they wanted more money, and by 2000, they had, just disappeared. The company, just closed shop. So seize the day. And the other is don't be greedy. If you're offered money, you're already making money, go at it, and just be happy.
That's right. Just take it and move on.
Exactly.
Take it and move on, because it's not. That's another thing. It's not about how much you have on
Yes,
hand, but
yeah,
how much can you actually make it to the future.
Exactly. Now the other thing too is I have I think a little advantage because I'm long in the tooth, right? I'm much older, so I have a longer perspective in life, and in life, really the important thing is your health. You can't put a price on your health. Good health, right? You need to be healthy, take care of yourself, right? And you don't really need a lot of money to be comfortable. I mean, there really is not a lot of difference between 2 million and 50 million, right? I mean, how much money do you need, right? So long as I have a roof on the head, and as long as I can eat, I think, right? That's really all, right? So the important thing is relationships. We have friends, and I'm very, very fortunate, right? I mean, having traveled here, it was easy to make friends, and really relationships. In fact, one of the things that I've experienced is sometimes you just want to be, in your apartment, and just chill, but then you get invited, to go to dinner, so you can't even quite rest because people want to take you out, so. But I've been very fortunate because, since coming here only a year ago, I've made lots of acquaintances. Saturday we were at dinner, met interesting people, really, really good, including, one of your guests, Luis, fascinating person.
He's gonna be in the podcast as well.
Yes, I know you told me, exactly. I'm gonna watch it, so I hope you watch.
Oh yeah, that's right. Now, back in the day, there was no YouTube. Of course, there was no internet.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
people can rely on the news, especially in the
Sure.
80s or in the 90s.
Yes. News were more reliable back then. Newspaper, there were only 12 channels in the United States, by the way, if you remember that, right? In some cities, And by the way, at 1 o'clock, all the channels shut, right?
Okay.
First, there were 12 channels. There were only 12, but not all 12 were used. I remember in Chicago, it was Channel 2, Channel 4, Channel 5, Channel 7, Channel 9, Channel 12. That's it. And then Channel 32, as I remember. Or maybe there was another Channel 25. So there were like 8 channels. And then at like 1 o'clock, they all shut. And then, they open again, like at 6. Yet there were a lot of very interesting content, back then. Now you have lots of junk, I don't have TV. I gave up TV. I cut my cable a long time ago. So the best decision I made was that. But you also mentioned about news, which is very interesting because I heard someone say that if you don't read the news, you are uninformed. But if you read the news, you are disinformed.
That's Denzel Washington.
Right, right, exactly. So, you really need to be careful about, what you read, and you have to read many, because right now it's really all bias, right? So the choices are, do you want to be misinformed or are you better off disinformed?
Now, we discuss right now bias, and I need to discuss about that inherent bias that you
Yeah,
are a Chicago boy.
yeah.
A lot of
Oh,
people from
Chicago.
Chile will be
Oh,
like,
okay.
wait a second, what is
Yeah,
going on? But
yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah,
being in the Chicago environment,
yeah, yeah,
how was growing up? Were you
yeah,
fans of the Cubs or were
yeah.
you fans of the
Yeah.
Chicago Bears? How was that?
Yes, I was a big fan of the Chicago Cubs. I mean, because that was my introduction to baseball, and also the Chicago Bears, right, and the Chicago Bulls. Uh, the only team that won while I was there was Chicago Bears in 1980.
5 or something.
It was actually 87, I think. Yeah, around 87 when they won the Super Bowl, right? The Cubs were just suffering. I mean, my goodness, they have I mean, they have been, and the Bulls were just awful. I mean, Michael Jordan had just joined the Bulls. I mean, and it was just really, Detroit was beating us. It was just heartbreaking. Bulls would go to the semis, and then Scottie Pippen would, God, yes, and Scottie Pippen was from Chicago, right? So, but we would always, and then when I moved to Boston is when Chicago started winning.
So you're saying that Michael Jordan waited for you to move to Boston to start
Exactly.
winning?
And then they won like every year. They just won. But I never got to enjoy, never got. But I think it's very good because it's good to be in a sports town, supporting a team that's not winning, because you can't always win all the time, and so that's why when I moved to Boston I said I'm not going to follow a team anymore because it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. First of all, you're abandoning your home team, but also when you support a team, they're going to lose. They can't win all the time, and I can't stand that. I can't bear that. It's just too heartbreaking to do that. Yeah.
And this brings towards a very, I would say, fascinating dilemma because you were in the 90s and also in the 2000s,
Yeah.
and you saw the dynasty of the New
Yes.
England Patriots.
Oh,
You
yes,
mentioned
yes,
there is no
yeah,
way a team can win all the
yes,
time,
yeah,
and they were
yeah.
awful in the 90s.
Oh, absolutely,
So how do you
absolutely.
see
Yeah,
that
yeah.
literal pancake of the fan base right there in Boston?
Well, at least in Boston, they were supportive, regardless of I mean, when you grow up there, you grow up with the team, you support the team. But yes, I mean that dynasty, right? It was dominated by basketball because Celtics, in the '80s and '90s were Larry Bird, and all those folks, right? They so people were used to that in Boston, but not football. I mean, New England Patriots was miserable.
They have a small stadium,
Exactly.
right there in
Yeah.
Foxborough.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I do remember watching on a Sunday, watching watching the Patriots when they pulled Tom Brady to substitute for an injured quarterback. I forgot his name now. And that's when he scored, his more than one touchdown, I think, on that game, and that was the start of, and followed. I followed them, yeah, until he retired.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's a particular case.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
of course, everybody can recall the Vinatieri goals, the top rule against the
yeah,
Raiders,
yes, yes,
and all the things that
absolutely,
happened.
yeah,
The environment of a city, but also a student body.
yeah,
So, given your time, because you have been in admissions and you also talk with other people,
yes,
you
yeah,
talk with
yeah,
other
yeah,
universities. What
yeah,
do you see in the student body of
yeah.
MIT that is different from the other student
Yeah,
bodies.
yeah. That is very interesting. Of course, the only other school I've been associated was Chicago, so that's my basis of comparison. In Chicago, of course, student back when I was there, it was dominated by people who were interested in finance. That's all they wanted to do. Consulting was not big. Yeah, I never. First time I heard of consulting or McKinsey was actually when I moved to MIT. But people wanted to be with, the Drexel Lambert, Bear Stearns, back then, right? E.F. Hutton. I mean, they all wanted to be, in finance. That's what the Chicago graduates were. But at MIT, people wanted, they were in consulting. There were people in finance, but not a lot of people in finance. Uh, but there were, but people were working for the manufacturing firms, HP, right? Dell, that was big. They were hiring a lot of people. Of course, now TI, Texas Instrument, right? Sun Microsystems, yeah. This was before the internet. Yeah, I mean, back then, they made things. America made things. Right? I think the only thing, yeah, even Dell now is not made in America. It's not made in China. But back then, they were all, Texas Instruments. I mean, they were all made in the U.S. Yeah,
And
yeah,
I remember during my time in
yeah,
MIT Sloan,
yeah.
I saw a famous alumni who happens to be the chair of Taiwan Semiconductors
Yes,
Corporation.
exactly. Morris Chang. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
I have to say that is
yeah.
the influence. If something happens there, and it's like, I'm gonna do something.
Right, right. No, absolutely. Yeah, Morris Chang. You see his picture. You walk in the building, the Chang building. You see his portrait. Yeah, yeah.
With his family right there, and
Exactly,
it's like, yeah, I know where I am right now.
exactly. And then you go to the other building, and then you see Alfred P. Sloan,
Uh huh.
former chairman of General Motors, and it was the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation that endowed, the Sloan School, of which ASB now is affiliated.
We're talking right now buildings,
Yeah,
and we're
yeah,
talking about places and people.
uh-huh.
I believe the Sloan building was not called the Sloan building,
Yeah,
and of course, it was not the same building.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
did you happen to see that transformation?
Yes. Well, I did when I moved to MIT. It was already called the Sloan Building, but the Sloan Building used to be the headquarters of Lever Brothers.
Oh,
It was headquarters, right? And when Sloan was founded in 1950, well, our association goes back to 1952. We were the School of Industrial Relations prior to that, but in 1952, the term was not available yet. We rebranded. We became the Sloan School of Management. It was the first school at MIT attached with the name of a person.
wow.
All the other schools, Department of Engineering, Department of School of Science, School of Architecture, right? There was known, but Sloan was the only school that had a name attached to department. It's the Sloan School, and it took 60 years to have another school at MIT that's named after another person, and that's a Schwarzman College of Computing. That's the
Wow.
newest school at, this is there are 5 schools at MIT. This is now the 6th school, the Schwarzman College of Computing. So anyway, the building used to be Lever Brothers until, and that was also part of the endowment, the Sloan Foundation had endowed, bought the building and classrooms and all that. And it was Sloan back then. I wasn't there, but I hear people who were alive, back in '52, and there were many. I met them at MIT, who were associated with Sloan even before it became Sloan. I mean, Sloan School was like a startup, pretty much like ASB now, right? It was a new school. They had to recruit faculty. they had to recruit faculty from MIT. The dean had to recruit faculty from MIT. They had to recruit from other universities. But it was a startup. It was small, and it's always like that. When I came in 1988, it was a very small school. You know, people knew I knew the dean. Even though I was very very low on, on the ranking. Lester Thoreau, a famous economist, was the dean. Back then. He was so you were able to, again, talking about, you were able to develop relationships with people. People cared about you. I mean, the people who older people. I mean, it was a I don't know if it's fair to say this. It was a paternalistic. I mean, the people look. You didn't. I rose in my job without applying. I mean, people from above would say, "Oh, you'll be the next." In fact, that's what my boss told me. Like, I was associate director, and he got tired of hiring, a director because there were like 3 directors before me, and they all left. After 2 years, and my boss just got tired of looking for a director. He said, "You're not the director." And I did become a director in 1999, and then around, I don't know, maybe early, 2000, again, without asking for it, they said, "Oh, you're now senior director." And it took me a while to change my email signature, and my boss said, "Oh, you have to update your signature. You're now senior director." And then, about 4 years before I retired, Jake, my boss who hired me here, made me and other people, assistant dean. So, but it was that kind of a place, right? I mean, people look after you. They look after your interests. So it was a very good, it was very good. I think I've lost my thought now. How it was in the 50s, right?
Yeah, and it's important to say that kind of spirit, it's like the spirit of the Sloan School that also permeated across the people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because how can you explain somebody can be for many years in an organization is because
Yeah.
there is something there.
Yes, yes, and people improvise, right? It was a startup. There was no system. When I went in there was really no system, and that's why when I came, I had to put systems. And it's pretty much like ASB right now, right? I mean, it's a startup, not a lot of systems, and I think coming here is, helping them put these systems in place so that you don't have to reinvent or, every year, right? Yeah, so that's what, yeah. So it's good to have seen that, at that Sloan. Yeah.
I'm led to believe that you were also, quote unquote, in commissions in other places, like in other regions of the world besides Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
So, what have you seen in these other regions that are different and are similar?
Right. Well, I think, one thing similar is that I mentioned this earlier is their ability to speak English, right? I mean, much, much higher level of English, especially the younger ones, compared to, people I met in the 80s. Also, very interestingly, the Chinese students. I remember when the first Chinese students came, around. Actually, it was pretty late. It was probably late 90s when we started a whole wave of Chinese apply. Because I remember I went to China in 2000 when I interviewed. First time I went to China to interview, somebody said, "Oh, Rod, you got to go to China and interview people." So 2000, around. But prior to that, when the Chinese students, when we admitted Chinese students, we had to require them to take a class in microeconomics because they never had economics in China.
Oh.
Right? I mean, it was a communist country. They did not need economics, right? Imagine that. We had to require them. They had to learn Western economics. And of course, now they're teaching us economics, right? So, but pre-2000, that was what, That was what we asked the Chinese students to do. Yeah.
That's such an eye-opening moment.
Yeah.
Like, how many things can change like in 23 years?
23 years, exactly, right. And now change, they're teaching the world how to, what economics is. Yeah, yeah.
Now, when people see you and they see the name, sometimes they may be making assumptions. Ah, you look Latino, you speak like a Latino.
You
But
see?
the question
Yeah.
that I would like to ask
Yeah.
is, how has been your relationship with the Latino community?
Oh, very good question. So remember I mentioned, how there were not too many people from South America. I remember going to South America back deep in South America, in Chile and Argentina in 1993, with a professor from Chile, Arnaldo Hacks, who passed away this year, unfortunately. He said, "Oh, Rod, let's go to Argentina and in Chile, let's go recruit." And that was the first time in Argentina. Interesting enough, first thing I saw when I was in Argentina was the word America, and I said, "Oh, that's the United States," and I'm forgetting America is not just the United States, but it's also South America. So yeah, I was like, "Oh," so it really was an eye opener to me at that time because until that time, America to me was the U.S., but it's more than the U.S. In fact, South America, yeah, Latam is very big, right? So that was in 1993, and that was just 10 years after Malvinas, the war, right, the Falklands, and Argentina was in a very high spirits back then because they had parity, meaning 1 peso was $1, right?
Yeah, the
And
parity of the dollar. Yes.
everything was expensive in Argentina, right? And after Argentina went to Chile, and I remember some of the people in Argentina told me, "Oh, be careful in Chile. What? Keep an eye on your wallet. It's a dangerous place, right?" But again, how the world changed, right? Within a few years, Chile just, yeah, I mean, they became wealthy, and it was the opposite in Argentina. It was the opposite, and now the Chileans, and that was the same thing also in the 90s when I was in Venezuela. They would say, "Oh, be careful when you go to Colombia." And again, how the world has changed. I would not dare go to, Venezuela right now. I mean, I love Venezuela, but I couldn't go, right? I mean, things have changed. So you did ask about my relationship. Yes, I've become very close to the first class that I recruited from Argentina and Chile, and to this day we still connect. So I hang out a lot with them, and I think we bonded because for the Latinos, right, the Latin Americans. And by the way, I don't like.
That term with the X.
Yes, thank you very much. Exactly. I'm being very careful. Exactly.
It's fine. It's
I'm
fine.
very exactly.
Guys, please don't use that thing.
Okay, yeah.
Don't use that thing. Okay.
Okay, okay, exactly. So, but I got very close to them, and I think the reason is that when the Latins, from the Chileans, the Mexicans, the Costa Ricans, all that, right, from the Andinos, right, when they moved to America, they moved their family, and it's really, for them, it's a total package. It's the experience, right? They want their spouse to also experience, and so to them, it's more than just getting A's in class or B plus in class, but it's also experiencing life in America, right? And for the people already in the U.S., the Americans, it's very different for them. To them, it's getting the good grades so that they can get that job at Goldman or McKinsey. So they focus really on the academics. They also focus on social, but very different from the Latinos, right? I mean, to them, it's you uproot your family, your wife, husband, children, you move, and you might as well take advantage of. And I think the thing that that bonds them is, I think, language. right? I mean, language, of course, the language, the food, soccer, football, right? They do that, on Sundays. So yeah, and it's not just Latinos from MIT, but they do that with the other schools, right? The Harvard, Boston University, Babson. I mean, yeah, it's
It permeates
yeah,
across the
no,
city.
absolutely, no, absolutely, yeah, right. And by the way,
Uh-huh.
that's the other thing I was going to mention. When you become that alumni network, it's not just limited to your school. It's that alumni network of MBAs, from the city, from your region, right? Yeah,
Now that we discuss about regions and that we are talking in a different region than the
yeah,
Latin American, what has been your analysis of Southeast Asia
yeah,
across the years?
right,
Because at the
right,
beginning we mentioned about the Japanese and the
yeah,
Chinese
yeah,
students.
yeah,
What
yeah.
about the Southeast Asians?
I am just, it's unfortunate that I was born in Southeast Asia. I was born in the Philippines. Lived there until I moved to the States, right, Chicago. Right. I really should have focused on recruiting in Southeast Asia. It's a very hard market to. I hate to use the word market. Very hard to recruit. In the region. Even though in the 80s there weren't too many MBA schools here, and even though people here wanted to study in the US, right? And then Europe just came recently. So, yeah, it's very interesting. We were more successful in Thailand. I'm speaking now for MIT. We were more successful in recruiting students from Thailand, and that was easy. Singapore, but not in Malaysia, not in Indonesia, certainly not in the Philippines, Taiwan to some extent, even Hong Kong is, So yeah, it's different. It's not like Latin America. I mean, there's something that bonds South, and that's language, right? It's the language, the religion, and so there's like, it's like one country, but here it's different, right? Because of history, languages, colonization. So some people here are more, a look towards UK, others look toward Europe, others look toward, the US, right? So yeah,
It's like a more heterogeneous way to assess and to
yeah,
recruit.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
also found that a little
yeah,
fascinating
yeah,
because for some reason some experts have been telling me that it's more expensive to pay the fee for high school than for university. It's because most of them are trying to go to Australia or go to
yeah,
UK,
right,
and it's very few and seldom far in between when I heard let's send them to America. It's like
yeah.
very few for some reason.
Because it's so remote, very, very remote to them. Asian parents, of course, want to be close to their children, right? And America is very far. U.S. is very far. I mean, traveling there takes a long time, right? Australia is what 6, 7 hours here, very easy. You come here, yeah. U.S. is hard. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I guess I need to understand from the perspective of a parent why they will
Yes,
take that. And
right.
that was the missing gap of my argument.
Mm-hmm.
But going towards a different angle of the discussion is the points of pensums, syllabus. You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that there's going to be something new coming on
Yeah,
uh,
right.
for the program in ASB.
Yeah.
So, how was the changes of syllabus during your time?
Yeah, I don't think syllabus changed it, but it is the way the courses are delivered,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was, I mean, your time was 2 years, and you had several action learning projects in the middle of the semester, which was, Jake heard from students that it could be disruptive because, you're doing, you know, classes and then you stop in the middle and then because you do action learning and then you continue the class. So that was, and I think that's what we wanted to avoid. You wanted to finish the class, then you do your action learning, or if you want to finish the class, you took an exam, You on action learning, you go on break, and then you start another semester. Right? That was what we wanted to do. In terms of the number of classes, I think they're about the same. I think they're about the same. So we're not. I don't know where we cut off. I think the only thing we cut off was really the action learning. I think the action learning. There is still action learning piece, but it's more deliberate, right? So the first action learning activity that this class is going to do is according to Jake. So they go to a company. They all they do is you just look. You don't touch. You just look. You observe, right? And then the second one is when you start observing, talking to people, and the third one is when you are there and you get to do the work. Yeah. And then of course you have your SAT after that.
That's a very eye-opening point of view because it's like mysteries that happens between one place and another,
Right.
or one generation after another.
Right.
Because otherwise, how do you know?
Right. And the other thing too is that this philosophy that we have here, which is similar to what we do in MIT, mens in manus, mind in hand, is in order to do action learning, you have to have the theories first. You have to learn the fundamentals, right, before you can do anything. So that's why the first trip is you're observing, and then you're in class, you're getting all the fundamentals, and then and then when you do your second trip, then you understand why you're doing some things in the classroom. Exactly, yeah. And then the third trip is when you really get to apply what you've learned in the classroom.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's absolutely
Yeah.
the point of view. Because sometimes I reflect myself when you learn a course like alphanomics,
Yes.
and it's like, I wish I had more time to practice this, and then an actual learning starts. And it's like,
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
now I remember talking with Jake, and you can correct me if I am
Yeah.
wrong, that in MIT Friday is usually
Yes.
different
No classes.
than the
Yeah.
others,
Yeah.
and it's because for the people to, hey,
Yeah.
you need to get out.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else is different?
So, oh yes, I didn't answer your question. Yes, so that's one thing. I think they introduced that last year, where they're keeping Fridays open, for other things. So there is recitation, on Friday, but they usually use that Friday for company presentations, or the interview, right? So some of them, fortunately for us in Boston, you can take the bus to New York. 5 hours you're in New York, or if you want something quick, you fly. 1 hour, but it takes you an hour at the airport. Another hour to get. Just take the train.
All of a sudden, you are talking like a trip from Kuala Lumpur to Singapore,
Exactly.
which is exactly the same
Exactly.
thing.
Exactly. So we want to give that Friday off for people to. And I knew somebody from Brazil. He would take the bus Thursday night, and he would visit companies on Friday in New York. And he did end up with a job in New York, before he graduated. So he was really just networking. So that's the whole point of that Friday off. And I think I think that's being introduced here too, that concept here of a Friday off. So you could be with family, you could be with your classmates, or you can fly to Bali or Ho Chi Minh City. Right?
Bali, Ho Chi Minh, Hong Kong, you
Exactly.
name it.
Exactly.
Because that's another thing that I realized is that in this part of the world, connectivity is very affordable.
Yes.
And that's the good side of the sword, because on the bad side of the sword, it's time to push and say, no many internationals can actually travel.
Yes.
That's another
I
thing.
know. That's true. I mean, we're taking for granted because not everybody can just get up and go to Australia, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's true.
Yeah.
Like I can recall some friends from Nigeria that they wanted to travel to Hong Kong
Sure.
or Nigeria or Singapore.
Right.
You need to apply for 3 months.
I know. I'm yes. I sympathize with those folks. Yeah.
Which is something that should be a better reflection for an international program. Like, if an international program wants to attract talent, it's
Yeah.
because that talent decided to
Sure.
continue the career in the region.
Exactly. No. I can understand that dilemma.
Now, talking about dilemmas,
Yeah,
and talking about things that happens in the past, in the present, and also the future, it compromises.
yeah,
Can we talk about which was the most challenging compromise?
yeah. I tell you what, the compromise. You do have to make compromises. You can't win it all, right? I mean, you have to, as I say, and I tell this when I was, the assistant dean. I tell this to my direct reports, mentees, or is, you have to choose your battles, man. You can't fight everything. You have to decide what to fight and what not to fight, because at the end of the day, relationships are really important, right? So you have to have compromises, but that doesn't mean that you lower your standards, right? The one thing you're not going to compromise is standards. Same thing with bringing this year's class. I know we had challenges because we were late in the game. It was in February when we rolled out the new curriculum. Normally you'd start recruiting in September, August, right, for next year's class, and we didn't do that until February. And so the administration was very clear. The clear mandate is we don't want to compromise quality for a number of students. You could have 15 students and 10 students, that's fine, but we're not going to have a class of 30 with with under. We're not going to compromise on quality, and we did not, and we ended up with 20 plus students in the class. So yes, so that's something we will not compromise, is certainly quality, and I think people should not do that, because you know you have you have to earn your respect, right? I mean, you're going to lose your respect if you compromise on quality. But so compromises. Well, I tell you where I've compromised. I told this your story about when I took this job, and my boss told me, oh, my former boss asked for more money, and they said no, and I could have insisted. I could have said, I want X more, or I'm not going to take my job. But to me, what was important was important was not the money. So what important to me was the people. I mentioned this to you, that to me was far more important than the money, right? And I made that. It was tough at first. I mean, they did pay me a lot at that time. It was tough, but I'm glad I did not compromise on what pulled me to that place, what made me decide to join that school, was because of the people. And I think that is important for people here at ASB, or people who will be applying to ASB, is money is not everything. Sometimes you're gonna have to make compromises, right? It's quality of life, and you can't you can also, yeah, quality of life is important, and your family, right? And time, and that's the other thing I'm very happy that I did not compromise time, right? What I meant to say is that yes, I work hard, definitely work hard, but my life is important. Quality of life is important. Yeah,
That's right, because besides the relationship with employer, it's also the relationship with yourself.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
it's in the end that, hey,
yeah,
how much have you cultivated?
yeah,
Given your career, given your time, I bet you saw different cuts
yeah,
of professionals
yeah,
across all these.
yeah,
So, what is the current generation
yeah.
that is similar and also different to the previous generations of MBAs? Because let's face it, every generation is a product of its time.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think. I don't know the answer to that, but I can tell you the changes that go through MBA graduates as they advance in age, or as they move up, corporate ladder. And somebody told me this. He was a former CEO of a huge, that's sounding like Donald Trump, huge money management company in the U.S. And he said, the the further up you go, the higher you are in organization, those courses in accounting and finance will become less valuable to you. The courses that would be helpful to you, when you move up, are the soft courses, right? The organizational behavior classes, negotiation classes, right? Because that's what you're going to be spending your time is managing people. You know, people management will take up 80% of your time, and the actual money part, looking at balance sheets, going to be like 20%. It's going to be about people, right? And so that's so I think that's going to be the difference, because you see a lot of young students in the MBA program, they load up on courses on, the hard courses, right? Finance, strategy, and all that. Good to have, they'll be valuable to you when you're starting your career, but, as you move up, they become less valuable, the other courses. So I guess the lesson there is don't ignore the soft courses, because they will become, valuable to you. Yeah.
I guess also that's the hidden message why there are so many meetings and very few hours to do the technical work.
Exactly, because of people.
Uh-huh.
Because of people, exactly. One crisis can take up, your entire month or year.
Oh yeah, that's true. It's like literally. I remember discussing this with Christina, and
Yes.
she mentioned you can see right there on the episode, like how a freshly minted graduate from Manchester, all of a sudden she was thrown into the crisis of the
Yeah.
Asian economic
Yeah.
meltdown that happened in the late 90s, and it's like you need to act quite quick and fast, but at the same time it's like most of the hard skills has to be amalgamated with the soft skills because you need to work with people.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it really compounds.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people will be watching this, and among of those, there will be young people.
Yeah.
I believe there are
Yeah.
going to be some
Right.
young roads right there also watching this. So I would like to ask you something.
Yeah.
What piece of advice will you give to your younger self?
Yeah. My younger self. Well, I think I got that advice. Somebody gave me that advice, actually. I'm very fortunate when again, going back to MIT, as I was signing my, employment papers, there was an older lady in HR, and she said to me, maximize your contribution to retirement, right? He said that. And I was 32 or 33. I mean, retirement was far from the picture. Like, it was not even, like, I don't know if I'd live, but I did follow her advice, and, just put away some money, and it paid off, which is great. So I think that's my advice to everyone is, I think the problem that we all face when we were young is we did not think we were going to get old. And it will come, right? I did not think I was going to get, gray hair. I look at my pictures from 5 years ago, I still have black hair, right? But you need to prepare for the future. I mean, you need to prepare for, people now live longer. People are taking care of themselves. They live older. I hope to live longer than my father, right? So I think you need to prepare for that. So an advice for myself, my younger self, probably worry less about what people think about you, right? Yeah. You know, although it's important to be mindful of others also, right? Yeah, exactly. But but really, well, I tell you what would be. Yeah. I wish. I wish I could have said no many times,
Mm.
right? It would have been easier to get out of situations when I was, if I could have said no rather than, look, this is the Asian in us, right? It's, yeah. I wish I was more, I was not born in the US, I grew up there, but I still retain my Asian side, and Asians do not like to say no. And what's easy in Asia, right? I mean, they understand if you say, "Oh, I'll think about it," they know, right? When you say, "I think about it," they know that that's a no. But in other cultures, they need to hear no, because if you say, "I need to think about it," they think you're thinking about it, right? But what I really meant was, I think not. I wish I could have said that. I still have trouble saying that, right? Yeah. I think that's probably the one advice I would have given myself is, I think I could have been more assertive and saying no. You're not insulting people. If you say no, you're just being honest. Yeah, yeah. And people respect it when you say no, right? Yeah, yeah. You're not wasting their time, right? For some people, say, yeah, great. I'm glad you told me no. I move on, right? Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's such a powerful statement. I guess I cannot find a better way to close the episode, let's be honest.
Well, thank you very much.
So, how people can find you?
Well, I'm here. I will be here and I'll be back, but I think the easiest is through email, rgarcia@mit.edu, and LinkedIn. A lot of people, you found me on LinkedIn, right? That night after exactly, I was already on LinkedIn, so yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, although I'm slow at checking my LinkedIn, so yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
As long as the answer arrives, it's all good.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Rod. I
Thank
really
you very
enjoyed
much,
this.
Fabian. Okay, great.
And for people
Gracias.
out there, please see you when I see you. Bye.
Bye.
That's it.